is here. We are redefining what it means to sit at the girls' table. Hi, everybody. You're listening to The Girls Table, which is focused on highlighting the voices of women in crypto and Web3. My name's Alana, also known as Trading Female, and today I am so excited to have Jaime Schmidt, the co-founder of BFF and the founder of Schmidt's Naturals. I had the pleasure of working alongside Jaime for a couple months, running the social for the Twitter for BFF, and I'm beyond excited to share Jaime's story today, discuss how Jaime was able to start and run not only one, but two successful NFT projects, chatted about advice on growing community in Web3, and discuss one of the most important topics of how to bring more women into the space. So Jaime, thank you so much for being here today. You are really one of my largest influential women in the space. I just want to start off, if you could quickly introduce yourself too.
Yes, thank you for having me, Alana. I consider you a friend. You know, like you said, we've worked together for a few months and I feel like we got to know each other well and just super stoked for everything that you're doing. So thank you for including me. As Alana mentioned, my name is Jaime Schmidt. I'm most known, I think, gosh, it's hard to say what I'm most known for, but I'd say one of my first venture was starting Schmidt's Naturals. It's a brand of personal care products that I started in my kitchen back in 2010. No business experience, more just a maker, artist, creator who had a desire to find fulfillment in my work, and I didn't know what that meant, and I'd spent many, many months and years soul searching, trying different jobs, exploring different career paths, and finally landed on making personal care products and building a business out of that, which started at the farmers markets. So scaled that up to an acquisition by Unilever 7 years later. And so I guess Web 2 entrepreneur turned Web 3 recently.
That is amazing. Also, whenever I go to the farmers markets now, I legitimately think of you every single time. Like just in your kitchen. I read your book too, obviously, and I'm like, wow, that was really you one day. So I'd love to start off with, what was your aha moment in crypto and Web3? I
first saw the opportunity to plug into Web3 when I thought about the intersection of consumer and the future of the internet. So being, the brand nerd that I was, I'm from growing Schmidt's, and somebody who was really passionate about the consumer space and the potential, for CPG in the future, I got excited when I saw the opportunity that Web3 held, for things like marketing and acquiring new customers and ways to retain existing customers. And so I built a community around it. It's called Crypto Packaged Goods, and we can get into that more later in the conversation. But I was really excited to offer, something that really explored that intersection that I didn't think was really being taken advantage of when we first started seeing, NFTs in early 2021.
It's so funny because I had no idea what CPG was. I just knew that there was an event at Launch House out in LA. And the whole entire time you guys were talking, you guys kept saying like, this group of CPG. I'm like, I don't know what this is. And you were just speaking at it with Chris. And suddenly after you're like, wow, wait, this is like a whole thing. You guys are crushing it. And I definitely want to touch on what you guys created in a little bit. But really, before we dive more down the Web3 rabbit hole, I want to discuss a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today. So when you were younger, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, you read my book. You probably know the answer to this, but for those who do not, I never knew. I was one of those kids who did not have, that idea of what they wanted to be when they grew up. And I hated the question, and it always put like so much pressure on me to answer, right? So I would make up things like, oh, doctor, veterinarian, dentist, whatever it might be. But just was really confused. And I always felt like there was nothing that I was really passionate about, nothing that I was, exceptionally good at. And so going to college was a challenge because you're forced to choose your major, right? You go to parties and people ask like, hey, what are you majoring in? It's like, I chose business because it was the one thing that seemed practical. It was an easy choice because my brother had majored in business. So I thought, why not me? But still, really confused about, what that meant for my future. And even when I graduated, 4 years later, I still was, I guess, on the fence about, what my career path looked like. And so I did start working in business. I guess I had my minor was in human resources, and so I got a job working in HR. Worked my way up the corporate ladder pretty quickly. But definitely, was paused a few years in and thought, Jamie, is this bringing you joy? Is this something that you want to keep pursuing? And realized that I didn't. But it was scary because I was, working my way up the ladder. I had really good benefits and salary, but I just wasn't feeling it long term. So I made a choice to fix it. Moved cross country from Chicago to Portland, Oregon, and told myself that I would get my hands dirty and figure out what it was I was meant to do with my life.
And I respect that so much because I think so many times in life we kind of just go through the pattern. We just follow what we think we're supposed to do without ever questioning what we really want to do.
And especially the circumstances that you grow up in. If you do have a family that's like your typical working father and the stay-at-home mom, and the brother or their sister who's like a high achiever, and that was my environment. And I love them to death, and they were great examples, but I just never felt like I fit that mold. So that makes it even more challenging.
And I definitely got when I was younger, it's like, be a doctor, like you'll make a lot of money, go right into business, do real estate, like run the family business. And it's like, you never even have the opportunity to step back and be like, do I even like this? Like, do I want to do that? Or am I just doing it because it's safe and it will make a lot of money? And so I read an article recently, but I just want to confirm, how many jobs have you had so far in your career?
Well, the latest Social Security report that I had gotten that showed, when I was writing my book, I ordered a report from the Social Security Administration, and it showed I had worked 22 jobs in my life, and that felt like a lot. And that doesn't include, like the babysitting and like the kind of the off the record jobs that I took under the table. Yes, a lot of jumping around, but I always felt like I was a really good worker, right? Like I was the employee you could count on. I always showed up. I worked extra hard. I put in overtime. But I just was jumping around a lot. And that was, I guess, mostly before college. Like I was definitely like that kid who felt like they had to like earn their allowance and like save up to buy their first car. And then in college, had a little bit longer stints in my employment, but still like was jumping around quite a bit. And the more you jump around, the harder it is to land a job, because then your resume starts to like become very long and you have to, explain yourself. But I think, times have changed a bit. I think with Web3, that looks a little bit different. I think like resumes in a lot of circumstances are just off the table completely. I think credentials don't necessarily matter as much. And we're definitely in a different time when it comes to, hiring and what it means to be like a qualified candidate.
Yeah, and sometimes now, because there's DAOs and you're working in so many different ones, this one-page resume of like one job that you've had for at least a year, that's just not a thing anymore in Web3.
Right.
But I feel like a lot of people in the world are still just trying to figure it out. And what is some advice you have for the people who still feel lost today?
Yeah, I feel like the people who feel lost are the people who are like most found or most like self-aware. Because the fact that you admit to yourself that like you are confused and you don't necessarily know what you want to do, and that you aren't fully settled, just shows that like you have standards for yourself, and that you're refusing to settle, and that you like recognize that maybe there's more out there. And so I think just acknowledging that in itself is a pretty big deal. It's easy to get caught up in the routine and to like convince yourself that that you're happy and that this is what you wanted because it becomes comfortable. And so if you're feeling lost, then, that's a sign that you're on the path to figuring things out.
And do you feel like right now, at least, you found your purpose? Like after selling Schmidt Naturals, starting BFF, working on CPG, starting that with Chris, and also investing with Color Capital? Or do you still feel like there's more that you're really just kind of hoping to find?
I definitely think I've found myself, more than ever. And I've identified, my purpose in helping other people and enabling opportunities for others. But there's always more. And when I say more, it's like, I don't know what that means necessarily. Like, I feel like because now I am more in a position of influence, and I have the means to help more people. I like feel, a pressure to do that in an exciting way, not in a way that feels daunting, but in a way that's like really inspiring. And so, I'm excited to see what that looks like for me. The world changes so quickly. If you had told me, 2 years ago that I'd be building BFF, like, I wouldn't have no idea what that meant, or like I probably would have laughed, but that's where I am now. And that's like where I feel like I need to be and where I'm meant to be. But fast forward, 10 years from now, like what does that look like? And so that's really, it's exciting. It's a fun position to be in. And it is funny because I look back to when I sold my first company, Schmidt's, And I had a moment of thinking that I was retiring, right? Like I was like, I worked hard, I earned this, it's time for me to take a break. And that's all true. And, I have taken little breaks here and there. But I was so naive to like how young I was in my career and how much more that I really wanted to do.
Yeah, I feel like you're definitely not taking a break now. When we were working together, I was definitely getting those texts at 10 p.m. about tweets to write. So, and there was a point in your career where you had just bought a moped, which is my dream, by the way. You were newly single and you were selling, correct me if I'm wrong, but hot dogs.
Yes. That was the best time of my life, Alana.
I know, that sounds amazing.
It was a very liberating time. So I had just moved from Chicago to Portland with my ex. Well, we weren't exes yet, but we had moved there partly to save our relationship, which, as we all know, doesn't usually work. And so we had settled into Portland, and I was newly single. And one of the first things I did was like buy a moped because my ex took the car, and so I was like left without any transportation. And I was living alone for the first time, which was really liberating and fun, and got a job at a hot dog shack, like literally working late into the night, making hot dogs for drunk people. And it felt so good. I was in my like late 20s too. I wasn't that young, right? So I was like, a lot of people in their late 20s are like deep in their career paths. And, but I was, taking a detour, and it was a detour that I really needed. And so I loved it. I think I encourage people, if you need to take that break and try something different and, liberate yourself, whatever that looks like to you, like just go for it.
Yeah,
I mean, were really trendy back then. This was in Portland, and like mopeds were like the thing. And so I definitely felt, pretty cool being able to, to have that.
No, I have a vision of myself in LA, just like riding to the beach with it. So yeah, I completely feel you.
It's fun. It's not as easy as it looks.
Oh, no. I've rode one in Vietnam before. I love it, though. I think it's so much fun, and you just feel like really cool. But well, I was on a walk the other day when I was actually listening to this part of the book, and I must say it completely inspired me, because I look at you, I look at Britt, and I look at these other successful women, whether in Web3 or outside of Web3, and I'm like, wow, you guys just crush it. Like, am I ever going to get there one day? And I'm just wondering, are there any steps you took during your career that you feel like helped you find your passions?
You're already there. Like, you're there, and whatever there means, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I think that's the issue with a lot of us, is that we think like, will I get there? But like, what does there mean, right? It's like, it's all about like recognizing where we are now and the impact that we're having, and like, being excited about what's to come. And so, I think, you're there, Alana. You're doing amazing things, and already made a name for yourself. And but I guess if I had to choose something that may help make a difference, it's like when I embraced the idea that I had to put myself out there and network and just be around. I tend to be like more of an introvert. I was building Schmidt's Naturals, and I was not on Twitter. I never had an account. No one knew who I was. I sort of avoided a lot of the networking events. And while my business was a success, I had an acquisition. I think I was limiting myself in terms of my reach, and like, building a bigger name for myself and unlocking more exciting opportunities. And so I think today we're in a position where there's so much potential to do that, right? Like, Twitter is the obvious choice. And I see people, Riley Beans on my team is a beautiful example of somebody who, admittedly started as a nobody, and just like literally made a name for herself just by putting herself out there, showing up every day, being a source of inspiration and hope for people. And so I just think the potential is like so exciting and real. So whatever speaks to you, right? Like, I think it's okay to take breaks too. Like, Twitter and other forms of networking can be overwhelming, especially for people, the more introverted types. And so if you do need to take a break and take a week off or whatever, like, don't feel that pressure to like be on constantly. Like, we're humans, and we need our, our downtime and our alone time and our whatever it is to disconnect and then reconnect again when we feel ready.
And I think Web3 has so many opportunities for you to be who you want to be. But then also you think about Schmidt's Naturals, and it's not like you had this scientific background where you knew the exact chemical balance to create the best deodorant. Like, you went to a DIY class, and you just which is crazy.
I was winging it. It is really incredible for me to look back and think that I created a product that was competing with these bigger deodorant brands like Dove and Axe and Old Spice, like from my kitchen, like literally didn't know the chemical reactions of things, right? Like I just knew what ingredients might help with odor and wetness, what things smelled good, and what made, a truly natural product. And I took that to my community. The farmers markets were the perfect opportunity to put my product in front of people and get real-time feedback, incorporate their feedback, and just be like really vulnerable and open and say, hey, like let's build this together. And I think that's happening a lot in Web3 now too, is like that. Those are the keys to success, is the vulnerability and the openness and the like incorporating your community. And so when I look back on it, it's funny because that was, like 12 years ago, but like those same principles apply to this new life that I'm leading in in Web3 now. And that's what's so fascinating to me.
And this is kind of just a question, at least that I even feel now, but do you feel like you have imposter syndrome both when you were growing Schmidt's Naturals and also now when you're in Web3?
The word imposter syndrome is it's one I get stuck on so much. I think like we're all imposters in some sense, but we're also like completely the opposite of that because we're like, it's funny. I go back and forth. So there's days when I'm like, imposter, screw that. Like I'm the only person that can build what I'm building, right? Like, so why would I
I love it.
Or intimidated? So like, where's this imposter syndrome? Where would it come from? But then there's other days where I am like, holy shit, like who do I think I am trying to compete with like so-and-so or like trying to like convince people that what I'm building is worth their attention. And so it's one of those weird black and white sort of subjective topics that I don't know that I'll fully ever understand. But I've read things where people are like, if you don't say you're an imposter, then you're crazy, or like, but then there's the opposite, like, if you think you're an imposter, then you lack confidence. And so it's such a wild phenomenon that I think like all of us can identify with on some level.
100%. I think for you, it's like you've been able to have that. You've sold your company, Unilever, and now you've had 2 such successful projects. So it's so easy to be like, what do you mean? You can't have imposter syndrome. Like you are like amazing. Like there's no way that you can have it.
Let me tell you, like that success does not immediately translate to confidence. I think like, yes, I sold a business and I, have made a name for myself or whatever it might be, but like it doesn't guarantee that like I'm an expert in all things, or that like I can do something better than the next person. And so like human is human, right? Like regardless of like what opportunities we might have at our fingertips or whatever, luck might have come our way, or there's so many factors built into like all of our success anyway that it's just so complicated.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. So I want to jump in a little bit to the Web3 projects I've done. So you've been so successful with the CPG project, and then obviously you grew BFF with Britt Morin to be one of the go-to projects for women in Web3. So just want to start off, like, how'd you do it?
Yeah, we'll talk a little about the CPG project first. So I started Club CPG with my business partner and husband, Chris Cantino, a couple of years ago when the Clubhouse craze was happening. We thought it would be a nice opportunity to all come together. When I say we all, I mean, people who are passionate about the CPG space, right? So we were very connected to other builders and customers in the space, like people wanting to explore CPG and just learn more about it, and share stories and resources, and so that was a fun way to spend COVID, right? It was like building on Clubhouse. We dubbed our efforts Club CPG. It wasn't a name we sat around and brainstormed. It kind of just naturally came about one day, casually. And we continued to build that. And then as Clubhouse started to phase out, Discord looked a little more interesting, and Twitter. And then this NFT craze, started to surface, and we saw the opportunity to go bigger with Club CPG and to add the NFT element. And so we had crypto packaged goods was our first launch, and that was a token gated community of about 300 active members in a in a Telegram community that we built for about a year. And then we've recently expanded that to include Pop, which is the newest iteration or level of Club CPG, which is a sort of a secondary community that overlaps with the Genesis collection. And it's an interesting time to be building this, because right now, this is June 14th. We're in the midst of turbulent times. But I think it's also a really opportunistic time because we are a community of builders that want to build something that's sustainable and lasting. And so it's a good place to be. BFF started in January of this year. Britt Morin is my co-founder. She had reached out to me, intrigued by what I was building with Club CPG and wanted to pick my brain on, what made a good NFT community. And we started to talk. We had known of each other for many, many months. We kind of ran around in the same circles. But that was our first get together. It was a call about Web3. And we started to talk about, just the lack of women and other, representation in the space, and realized there was something to be built there. Britt had been thinking on it for a long time. I think my enthusiasm kind of gave her the push, and then together we decided to become co-founders and decided to launch. So this was January 2021, and we started with the big YouTube kickoff event where we brought together 5,000 women and non-binary people primarily, introducing them to Web3 and crypto and everything that was related. And so we saw it as a huge, huge success. A lot of people jumping in for the first time, setting up their wallets. And as many of you know, we airdropped our first NFT, the friendship bracelets, to everybody that attended the event.
Yeah, which was so amazing because it brought so many new women into the space. I heard from so many people that was their first NFT. And also I send the BFF launch video to everybody who first wants to learn, jump into the space.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, one of the most important parts of Web3 is community. And I've seen specifically firsthand how active both BFF is and CPG. Is there anything you did early on that you think helped you get to where you are today to really be able to build that community?
I think a lot about, how the skills and experience that I gained building a successful brand in Web2 have translated. And while they're very different, success in Web2 does not guarantee success in Web3. I think there were a lot of learnings along the way that certainly have, armed me with the ability to feel more confident, I guess. And, part of that is team building. I think that is huge. And building Schmidt's, I started alone. I built a couple of years by myself. But then over the years, built up a team and ended up with 150 employees working across 2 shifts, built out a whole factory. So learned a lot, what it means to lead a team and, be, an example for others working with you. And that's been really beneficial for me. The BFF team is incredible. I'm not saying it's because of my experience necessarily building teams in the past, but I don't know, whatever it is that we have going on, it's working, and everybody, it's a healthy community. Anyway, community within the team. And I think other things I've learned, budgeting, right? Financial management, that's huge. And that's easily overlooked in the Web3 space. A lot of, I think, project founders jump in, aren't necessarily thinking about their runway, their P&Ls, all that, the nerdy finance stuff that you're forced to think about as a Web2 founder. And so having that experience and backing me, giving me the confidence to jump into Web3, I think has been, especially now, during this bear market where, ETH is not worth what it was when we first minted our project. And so I'm able to, tap into those learnings and understand, what it means to have a responsible financial plan.
Yeah, it's crazy because nobody talks about how really the market affects you as a builder and where you sold it or how much you're getting in royalties versus what you thought you would do. So you're probably having to budget and forecast every day, redo the amount and figure out how much you're making. And
yeah, because it's not Web3, brands like BFF are not, ongoing revenue generating entities, right? I mean, we have secondary sales, yes, but it's not a product that I can take to Target and, sell, hundreds of thousands of units a year or whatever it might be. You have to get creative with the way you're thinking about your revenues that are incoming.
And what are, obviously coming from VC and investing in different projects and infrastructure, a lot of them count revenue as just an NFT drop. And you can only do so many NFT drops. So what are other ways that projects are finding ways to make money and revenue?
Yeah, I think that's the big question right now, and I think it's a very important one. There's different utility-based initiatives that you can work into your brand or your project, but they have to, resonate with your mission and make sense for you, and they do take extra staffing other resources to even get them off the ground. And BFF does have a few things in the works that I'm really excited to share soon. But these were all in our thinking when we started, right? Not necessarily a reaction of the market conditions, but at the forefront of, when we started BFF in thinking long term about ongoing revenue generation. And but we did, BFF has claimed that we want to add more NFT projects to our mix. And that's always been in our thinking, but like now is not the right time, right? We're not interested right now in dropping another NFT collection and, deep in the bear market. And so we're, still exploring those ideas, but in thinking about ways we can support other artists, but, maybe we're shifting priorities now. Maybe that's not going to happen and, later in 2022 as we had initially planned. And maybe that comes next year or the year following. And maybe we move up some of our other roadmap initiatives.
That's so funny because that was actually a question that I had where have you had to change anything with the roadmap given how the market's doing right now?
Yeah, I'd look at our roadmap, weekly, and I'd check in with myself and in the team and think, how are we on track? Like, does this still make sense? And it does, and that feels really good. But as mentioned, an NFT project might not be in our immediate thinking right now. Like, we're thinking about ways we can support other communities, but we're not about to throw out, another PFP project, for example, and, just hope that it does well. That's just irresponsible, for a brand like us, I think.
And what's been your biggest challenge since starting both BFF and CPG as well?
Ooh, biggest challenge. I think a lot about like building in public and how that's really different from how I grew Schmidt's Naturals. I was very, kind of behind the scenes as a founder before and just doing things at my own pace. I did not have investors, so I had the luxury of going at my own pace and not necessarily, sharing every decision and getting input. And that was helpful in a lot of ways, building a CPG company. But now with Web3, like it's not an option, frankly. And it's, you have a different level of accountability. You have a lot of people to answer to, and rightfully so. But I think there also is benefit that comes with that because it forces you to be more planful. It forces you to be more responsible with your budget, to think longer term. Because when I was with Schmidt's, building Schmidt's, I was winging it. I truly was winging it and not looking past 2 months into the future. Just like, all right, we're doing this now because it makes sense. And that I got lucky in that worked. But it's hard to build a business that way. And so with BFF, I'm in a position now where I can't get away with that. I have to think more long term and answer to people. And so I think that level of accountability that comes with that is actually a healthy thing.
Were you scared of failing at all when you started BFF, when you started CPG? I mean, you just had such a successful exit from Schmidt's. So what was that like?
Yeah, I think, when you have a success, you can choose to sit back and be done, right? And you're like, okay, I ended on a high note, right? Things are good. Or you can, take another risk and put yourself out there and continue to try new things. And I chose that. And I knew there was extra risk that came with that because I had this prior success, right? There were certain expectations of me. I had built up a reputation that was, now frankly, like exposed. And so, yeah, it was scary. But it was so important and meaningful to me. And I believed in it so much that, the worst that could happen was, it didn't get to the level that we, had hoped, or maybe fewer people were exposed to what we were doing. But I knew, and I still, know in my heart and with my full self that like what we're building with BFF is going to be big. I truly am. I'm very excited about everything we're doing and just what we've done already. Just the number of people we have turned on to the Web3 space, the education we've provided, and the opportunities from our airdrop and all the other programming that we've built. So yeah, everything's scary and everything's a risk, but you live one time and you might as get the most from it and help the most people that you can.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think there is such a big gap between women and men in the space? And what do you think we could do to really help bridge that gap?
Yeah, I think that question comes up a lot. My traditional answer is, you think about Web3 or crypto, you think tech, finance, things that are inherently more masculine by nature. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why, where we started, right? Like that, we started on this sort of in this tone of like, these are manly things, or these are things that like men are more drawn to. And it's changing. Like there's so much more work to be done, but like we have made good progress. And I think it's really exciting, and just to see the amount of enthusiasm from women, from the men supporting women and non-binary people, and just we're at a turning point in history where I think we're gonna look back and say, like, that was the moment things sort of changed, right? Like, there's again much work to be done, but we're on a track that's more promising than where we were, a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and so many new people are still jumping into the space every day. And then a lot of people think, hey, I want to start a project, or I want to jump in. Like, especially in the beginning, it was like money grabs, or it was just people trying to get it. But the people who really just want to build something in the space, what's one piece of advice you have who want to start their own company and their own project?
Yeah, I think, like, know your unique offering. As early as we are, we're also very saturated, right? There's a lot happening. It's hard to come up with something incredibly unique and innovative and new. But if you understand what your value add is, even if it's something small, right? Like, it doesn't have to be some big, huge, mind-blowing thing, but is there some small differentiator that you feel proud of and that, like, resonates with you on a personal level? Find that and own that, and, like, that's what's going to drive your success. And no one can ever compete with that one thing that's truly personal to you.
Do you think it's a bad time right now, at least just given the market, to start selling, or do you feel like because if you're really truly building something and you do have that unique value, then you'll find your place?
I think that's a really personal question. Whatever your comfort level is, I wouldn't deter people from necessarily launching something right now. But if you do feel uneasy and that you want to, ensure that the market is very hyped, then wait. I did launch Schmidt's, right at the end of the last recession. I had really small, insignificant, slow growth in the beginning. It took several years, but I didn't have expectations of myself to build quickly. Like I said, I didn't have investors and partners in the beginning, and so I had that luxury of going at my own pace. And so if that's something that you can pull off, then do it. It's a very, very personal situation that only you really have the answer to.
Yeah, and I think people in this space expect things to go so quickly. It's like, okay, like, I'm just going to sell out, make all this money. It's like, no, if you're truly building something of value, have patience, build, take your time.
And I think about, there's probably so many projects and brands being built right now quietly that are going to be, like, hugely successful that we hear nothing about. And I think that's, like, so thrilling and interesting. And I can't wait to discover them. And, many they're not on Twitter talking about what they're doing. They're just doing it.
That's so true. Yeah. There's so much happening behind the blinds that we don't even know.
Right.
Okay. So what's next for BFF?
All sorts of goodies. So we have, when is your podcast going live, Alana?
Hopefully next week, but if NFT New York City.
By then we'll have put out a memo. We're putting out something this week that gives some really exciting updates, and the timing of it is great with the bear market to give people a little more confidence and just some perspective on, like, where we're headed. And so a lot of it's just more color, added to our roadmap, and others announcements are entirely new. So.
Ooh, so exciting. Britt's not here to give me all the alpha.
Yeah, Britt's better about giving the alpha.
Awesome. Well, if you could sit next to anybody at the girls' table, who would it be?
Yeah. I'd sit by you. You're fun.
You can't say that. I've already gotten that one. Now you have to pick somebody else.
Oh man, that's tough. All my team. I love my team. If you didn't notice,
I love it.
In my earlier comments, I truly do. I think that's just like a group of women who just believe in what we're building, and just, like, even outside of BFF are just, like, really incredible people who we can all feel really inspired by. So I do look forward to seeing them at NFT NYC, and yes, I would sit by them any day.
Awesome. Well, I want to end it with any last minute advice you have for the listeners, whether that's starting a project, whether it's just like you're feeling lost in your career, anything that you want everybody to know.
I think the biggest takeaway I would hope for people is just to, like, not settle, regardless of whether that means, like, what you're pursuing in your career, or, I don't know, your plans for your crypto portfolio or whatever it might be. Like, and by don't settle, I mean, like, play the long game, right? Like, things take time, and we don't always have the answers right in front of us, but if you know what's important to you and what you value, then just continue to follow that, and you can't lose.
I love that. Jaime, thank you so much for coming today. As always, I'm going to keep following you. Can't wait to see you in New York City. I think you're an inspiration to everybody in this space, and I just can't wait to continue to be by your side and watch your journey. So
thank you, Alana.
Thank you. Bye.
Alana, are you editing this? I feel like we should redo that part.
No. Oh my God. That was amazing. We're keeping that. We're keeping it up.
You can practice your editing skills thanks to me.
I actually have an editor. He's great. But...
Hi, editor. Thank you for doing that.